Hey everybody, Ram Dean and Black with you on our FN studios. Got to talk about GSP. People clearly still interested in the former 170-pound champion. According to Ariel Helwani, he's still in negotiations with the UFC. And you and I had a chance to talk to George a number of weeks ago at a show in Kingston, put together by Hayabusa. Great show. And George wants to fight. That's a reality. But he's not willing to cross a certain line. He has certain criteria and goals in mind, and if the UFC meets those, he will be more than happy to step foot inside of the cage.
Yeah, and you got to respect that. I'll tell you, we have certain lines that we don't cross. We got every little detail of every conversation of those discussions. But George is our friend, and he asked us not to pass that information on. And we don't have egos that need to constantly be putting out tweets about whatever George said. But what we can simply tell you is he never left negotiations. Negotiations are not binary things. Oh, we're talking. Oh, we're not talking. Talking and not talking is an aspect of negotiations. Walking away from the table and waiting, offering something, being angry. All of these emotional aspects, it's like a fight. A negotiation is like a fight. It's like a fight sometimes that lasts for 8 months. You bring in a different part of your team. Your lawyer comes in. Their lawyers come in. They make a statement. You make we think our contract is done. That's a negotiation. That's part of the negotiation play. Coming out and saying, we did this publicly now, and they use the media. And George, I don't know if George wanted us to be talking as part of the aspects, because the media these days, when you saw Bjorn Rebney talking about his organization, he was like, and then we're going to do a media campaign. They use the media, and we are all pawns in this game. But if we step back and are friends with George and observing the experience, all you see is exactly what you always see in any large negotiation between two business parties. Ups and downs and emotions and swings, using the media, getting them to break news, getting them to say other things. Your team does this. They believe that they're free of a contract, but they believe we're not. Send some lawyers in. This is all normal. And it's going to go on for many more months. And however it goes at any time, if you take a snapshot of it, you're like, oh my God, it's not going to happen. Then you take a snapshot of it a week later, you're like, oh my God, they're talking. Yeah. This is all just part of it.
How close do you think the UFC is to renegotiating with George, to getting him back on the UFC's roster? We know that Conor McGregor, he's out till at least March. He's got a growing family that he needs to take care of. Nick Diaz, yes, he's ready, but we don't know when Nick Diaz is coming back. Same with Nate. Nate says he's not coming back till he gets the third Conor fight. Ronda Rousey set to make her return at UFC 206.
Saying it might be her last?
Could be her last fight. We don't know if Brock Lesnar is going to be fighting much longer, if he is ever going to step foot inside of the cage again. Michael Bisping says he loses. He's out of the game as well. So if you are the new UFC, don't you need to get a guy like George St-Pierre?
Maybe so. And I think what you're saying right now is how we should look at things if you do take interest in how almost any of the workings of life. You don't look back and you don't obsess over what happened. You look at where you are right now and what's laying out in front of you. And it's like, well, they may have said this or that may have happened, or screw those guys, but wait a second. If I was them, I would want to sign me. That's a good spot to be in. Maybe they'll be motivated enough to see this my way. It's really the simple nature of how anything is going to happen. This is how life works. This is how everything works. So if George and his people are looking at it and going, we think they're very motivated to have us on account of the reasons you listed. On the other side, the people who own the UFC now, a large conglomeration, can be like, we've already made all of these plans. He's mistaken about this, so it doesn't go that way. Or when you want something and somebody else happens to want it and it works for everybody, that's another little piece of advice for the world. The only thing for anything you're doing in the world, the only good deal that's ever going to be made is a deal that works for literally every single party involved. George St-Pierre coming back would be great for George and his people. You would think it would be great for the UFC because they'd have another big star. And it would be great for us who loves to see George St-Pierre fight. So in theory, this is one of those workable deals. A deal that works well for everybody. Go try to make a deal that's really good for you and not good for somebody on the other side of the table. Let me know how that goes.
I know George, if he does re-sign with the UFC, he's more than happy to face off with anybody at 170 pounds. But we also heard he'd be interested in fighting Michael Bisping for the 185-pound championship. What is the most interesting fight for you as a George St-Pierre fan? Is it a fight at 170 pounds or that move that they talked about for years and years and years, George going up to fight Anderson Silva at 185 pounds? Do you believe the most intriguing fights are at 185 or that he keeps himself in that mix at 170?
George told us straight up, and Faraz has told us, and they have said this publicly for 3 or 4 years, that ultimately he'd like to fight at 155 pounds. And I want to see George St-Pierre fight Conor McGregor at 155 pounds. How about that?
Holy smokes. And realistically, that's a fight that could happen. Faraz was trying to get George during that Nathan Diaz-Conor McGregor fight. George, call out the winner of this fight. This will be a huge fight for your career, and you could clearly see how it would be that George would have an advantage in that fight.
And Faraz is a very smart tactician, and he's a art of war thinker. And looking at it, Faraz doesn't care about tweets and call-outs and saying, but as a tactic, makes a lot of sense. But that was that moment to do it. It was right there, and that was when Diaz won that fight. Right there was the time to do it, but there was no contract in place. All part of that flowing thing that is a contract negotiation. It's boring. That kind of shit is boring, my friends. I tell you that right now. If you start to obsess over it and look at it, and we've laid out how you can look at it if you want to, you will end up spending a whole bunch of time figuring out how lawyers talk and how people play chips in a poker game, and very little time watching the thing that you love to watch, which is fighting.
GSP is still one of the biggest stars ever in mixed martial arts, and I know the Canadian fans would love to see him back in action.